In the early 1940s, Hitler's Nazi Germany seemed unstoppable. His forces had conquered France, Poland, Norway, and the Balkans. With Italy and Japan as allies, the Axis powers posed a global threat. Britain stood alone, battered by relentless bombings but refusing to surrender. It looked like nothing could stop Hitler's advance. But what seemed like a path to world domination soon became his greatest downfall. His overconfidence and critical miscalculations led to a series of defeats that sealed his fate. So how did the war turn against him? Let's dive into the turning points that led to Hitler's ultimate collapse. After the fall of France, Hitler believed Britain would surrender. He saw no way for them to resist without allies in Europe. But Prime Minister Winston Churchill had other plans. He rallied his people with powerful speeches declaring, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall never surrender." Determined to force Britain into submission, Hitler launched an all-out air assault. His Luftwaffe bombers targeted British cities, military bases, and supply lines. London was bombed for 57 consecutive nights in what became known as the Blitz. But Britain's Royal Air Force fought back fiercely. Though outnumbered, British pilots, using newly developed radar technology, intercepted German planes and inflicted heavy losses. By September 1940, Hitler realized his air campaign had failed. The British people refused to break. His invasion plans were scrapped, his first major setback. Frustrated, he turned his attention to a much bigger target, the Soviet Union. In June 1941, Hitler made one of the greatest strategic mistakes in military history. He broke the non-aggression pact with Stalin and launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion the world had ever seen. Over 3 million German soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and aircraft, poured into Soviet territory. The attack was swift and brutal. Nazi forces advanced deep into Russia, capturing vast regions, including Ukraine and Belarus. But Hitler underestimated the size of the Soviet resistance. More importantly, he underestimated the Russian winter. As temperatures dropped to -4 °C, German tanks froze, weapons malfunctioned, and soldiers suffered from frostbite. Hitler's army was not prepared for such harsh conditions. Soviet forces, led by Stalin, launched a powerful counteroffensive. The Battle of Stalingrad became a turning point. German troops, exhausted and surrounded, were forced to surrender in early 1943. This was a crushing blow to Hitler's dream of conquering the East. While Hitler was struggling on the Eastern Front, his ally Japan carried out a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. This attack brought the United States into the war. With America's massive industrial power now fueling the Allied forces, the balance of power shifted dramatically. Factories in the U.S. worked around the clock, producing tanks, aircraft, and weapons at an unprecedented rate. Soldiers poured onto battlefields across Europe and the Pacific. Hitler had now made enemies of the world's 3 greatest military powers, Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. He was fighting a war on multiple fronts, stretching his resources thin. By 1944, the Allies prepared for the most ambitious operation, D-Day. On June 6th, thousands of American, British, and Canadian troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, facing fierce resistance from German machine guns and artillery. The battle was brutal, but the Allies pushed forward. With each passing day, German forces were driven back. France was liberated, and Hitler's grip on Europe began to crumble. Germany was now trapped. The Soviets were advancing from the east, while the Allied forces pushed in from the west. Hitler's empire was collapsing. Cities fell one by one. His forces were exhausted, outnumbered, and running low on supplies. By early 1945, the Soviet Red Army reached Berlin, Hitler's last stronghold. The city was reduced to rubble as bombs rained down. Street battles raged as Soviet troops closed in on Hitler's bunker. Realizing the end was near, he refused to surrender. Instead, on April 30th, 1945, he chose suicide, avoiding the humiliation of capture. A week later, on May 8th, Germany officially surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Victory in Europe Day was celebrated across the world, marking the end of Hitler's reign of terror. His downfall was caused by his own arrogance and critical miscalculations. He underestimated Britain's resilience. He repeated Napoleon's fatal mistake, invading Russia in winter. He underestimated the strength of the Soviet Red Army, and he provoked the United States, adding an industrial giant to his list of enemies. In the end, Nazi Germany's dream of world domination collapsed under the resistance of millions who refused to give up. The world had won against tyranny, but the war was not yet over. The Pacific still burned with conflict. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Riaz Analytics, and click the bell icon to receive every single update. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, like, and share it with others. Your support keeps this channel going. Thank you for watching.